Welcome to Let's Talk Portsmouth, a new communications enterprise developed by the City of Portsmouth's Marketing and Communications Division. If you're interested in Portsmouth news and information, public concerns, and other relevant topics that could impact your life, Let's Talk Portsmouth is the podcast for you. We'll talk city business, including interviews with city administrators, hold discussions with civic and community organizations, and converse with newsmakers from around the state on topics close to home and heart. Now, here's your host, Sharon Hoggart.
Hi, guys. This is Let's Talk Portsmouth, the podcast that's all about news you can use. Our goal, to enlighten, educate, and bring you thought-provoking discussions on trending topics. And have we got an interesting topic for you on today's podcast. I'm your host, Sharon Hoggart, from the Portsmouth Marketing and Communications Department. Today, we're talking about a trend, albeit a disturbing trend in the U.S. that we here at Let's Talk Portsmouth thought died decades ago, and that's book banning. Historically, we've all studied book burnings staged by Adolf Hitler across Nazi Germany in May of 1933. The incident was so widespread and so bad that Time magazine coined it the Bibliocaust. Tens of thousands of books were burned. In a preliminary interview with one of today's guests, we were reminded of the Harry Potter series of books that were challenged in the early 2000s. But listen to this. Between 2021 and 2022, an unprecedented number of books have been banned or challenged right here in the home of the brave and the land of the free, the good old US of A. On this issue of Let's Talk Portsmouth, we are discussing the recent trend of banning or challenging books with three experts, two from the Portsmouth Public Library and one from the Virginia Library Association. Join us in welcoming to the show Lisa Varga, Executive Director for the Virginia Library Association. Easter DiGangi, Manager of Library Systems and Support Services with Portsmouth Public Libraries, and Alexander Grosby, Programming and Outreach Librarian with the Portsmouth Public Library. Again, guys, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Thank you.
This is the icebreaker section of the show. It's like our guests to tell the audience a little bit about themselves. Ms. Lisa, we'll start with you. Tell us about yourself, where you came from, and your educational and professional background.
Sure. Thank you so much. I actually grew up in New Jersey. I have lived in Virginia since 2001, and I received my master's degree in library science from Rutgers University in New Jersey.
Okay, wonderful. All right, next, Ms. Easter.
Yes, I'm originally from Ohio. I've been in the library profession for, at least 17 years. I got my bachelor's in political science with a minor in chemistry, and then I got my master's in library and information studies in 2010. I'm part of the class of emerging leaders for the American Library Association of 2011.
Wonderful. And not last but not least, Mr. Grosby, tell us about where you hail from and your professional educational background.
Yes, I'm originally from Vermont. I got a history degree from Syracuse University. I then worked for stints at Apple, the National Museum of American History, and the Museum of Pop Culture. Then I got my master's in library and information science from Simmons University in Boston. And I've been with Portsmouth Public Library for a year and a half. Before that, I worked for a year with Portsmouth Museums.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, let's get started. At the top of the show, we mentioned the book burning event in Nazi Germany in 1933. But that wasn't the only book burning in world history. And this question is for the panel. What other book burnings have taken place in our history, and what was the reason behind the events?
Book burning has go back a long time in history and all around the world. We've got the Middle Ages, ancient China, Mexico, Afghanistan, and yes, the U.S. as well. You've heard of the Library of Alexandria. That happened around the 17th century A.D. Although specific reason can't be proved, it may have been accidental, as legend has it, when Caesar torched his ships in the harbor, or it may be that people grew hostile to its content. Well, regardless, Matthew Battles, the author of Libraries and Unquiet History, says that biblioclasms usually fall into two groups. First, they may be an attempt at revision, and second, they may seek to erase their authors and readers from history. So an example of revision, you have in ancient China, the Qin Emperor Shi Huangdi, who ordered all Chinese literature, history, and philosophy written before his dynasty burned. And he sought to control learning and intellectual work. If you're looking at in the United States, that goes back to the colonists in New England. Boston Puritans would immediately burn any books from England that criticized the dominant faith or otherwise were blasphemous and heretical books. And then you take us up to, say, the Red Scare in the late 1940s and early 1950s, and you saw book burnings here in the United States because of, the perceived threat of communists in the U.S. during the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States.
Okay, anybody else want to weigh in?
No, I think Easter covered it. The only thing that I would say about it is I agree it's an attempt to erase what has been written to prevent information from being shared or handed down. It's a very severe response to the sharing of information.
Lisa, what was the reason behind the book challenging of the Harry Potter series? I've heard all kind of stuff in the media back then. What was the real reasoning behind that?
Sure. Harry Potter was an interesting one because it was a title that inspired so many people to read. It was an unprecedented moment seeing all of these people, young and old, coming together over a mutual love of a book series. And then we saw pockets of people who thought the books promoted witchcraft or evil, and they launched a campaign and lawsuits against the books, probably most famously in Gwinnett County, Georgia, where there were several lawsuits filed against different titles in the series by one parent, and all of those lawsuits did not amount to much. They didn't succeed in banning the book.
Well, thank the Lord for small favors, and that's just an opinion of this lowly host here. All right. Easter.
Understood.
My mother used to say that there's nothing new under the sun, and I guess she was right. What do you think has set off this rash of book bannings and challenges in the United States? And Alexander, Lisa, please join in with this as well.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that, people have been talking about how, and I think it's true, our country, seems more divided and polarized than ever. And this is, I think, a big symptom of that. In particular, this rash of book bannings and challenges, I think that you can, in part, point to, what happened in June of 2020 with George Floyd as being, it was an impetus of, a sort of a awakening, of racial injustice. And actually, the reason why I cite that is one thing that may have set things off is actually the founder of the No Left Turn in Education group cited that in the origin story for their group. So that does seem to have kind of set off people, banning books and stuff like that, which they think, might, that they think that it's sort of anti-white, and looking at, being sort of pitting, one group over other groups and stuff. Their opinion is.
Wow. And this is we are in the 21st century, are we not?
Yeah.
Also.
I would also suggest what's different about the current spate of book bans versus what happened with Harry Potter is that these efforts aren't really aimed at the books or kids. It's a calculated political strategy that's aimed at dividing parents and voters ahead of the midterm and likely the presidential election. The messaging has evolved in the past few months even. We're hearing much less about critical race theory, but much more about parents' rights and anti-pride efforts. I think whatever is fitting the political moment right here in Pride Month. And the ones that are happening now with the pace of social media, one person can post a list of books they don't like and share it immediately around the world with others. And the speed at which that information, and more specifically that misinformation, can be shared, it just exacerbates the volume of challenges.
Wow. Alexander, you have anything you want to add?
No, I think they pretty much covered everything on that one.
Okay. All right. Lisa, this is for you. Something significant regarding the topic of book banning and book challenging took place in Virginia last month in May. Give us a synopsis of this legal action and the Virginia Library Association's response.
Sure. This is kind of a long one, so please bear with me. But in April, a Virginia General Assembly delegate, sorry, I should say that again for your audio folks. In April, a Virginia General Assembly delegate filed 2 lawsuits on behalf of a congressional candidate in the Virginia Beach area. The lawsuits were aimed at the authors and publishers of 2 titles, Genderqueer and A Court of Mist and Fury. All of the circuit court judges in Virginia Beach recused themselves from the cases, and they were sent to a retired judge for review. The judge looked at what had been submitted to her, including pieces of the images and text from both books, rather than the entire book, and determined there might be cause for these books to be called obscene. This led the petitioners to file a temporary restraining order against the distribution of the book to Barnes & Noble in Virginia Beach and the City of Virginia Beach Public Schools. The lawyers for the school system and Barnes & Noble requested and received a continuation, so we don't expect to hear anything on that before July. In the meantime, Genderqueer has been taken off of the shelves in the Virginia Beach Public High Schools where it was available, but that was a separate action by a school board member that made that happen. One of the interesting things here is that the group opposed to these titles are using very specific language. They insist they aren't banning books, but getting a book taken off the shelf because you disagree with the content is exactly that, book banning. And so in response, the Virginia Library Association got together with the National Coalition Against Censorship, and I believe it was 16 or 17 other organizations that signed on to a statement opposing this action.
Alexander and Easter, to your knowledge, has there been any kind of response to this legal action locally or in our region?
I have not seen any spike in us or even the checking out of these materials. For us, it's just making sure they're out there and making sure they're labeled correctly. But we're not gonna react, in any way. We'll just keep doing what we do, and we'll keep doing what we do, which is just providing information and these resources to the people.
That's what libraries are supposed to do. All right.
Right.
In 2021, the American Association received 729 reports of book challenges, a rate which the ALA called unprecedented. This question is for the panel. Could this number of book challenges actually be an undercount? And if so, why? And Lisa, you also referred to another number in your note to me of 1,597 books or titles in your updated figures, and I want to throw that out to the panel as well.
Sure, and I'll just jump in and say that the American Library Association has been collecting, analyzing, and sharing book censorship data on voluntary reporting and news stories since 1990. And ALA's Office of Intellectual Freedom is what we call the original censorship hotline.
Okay. So,
Yeah, I mean, this totally could be an undercount because a lot of it is, some people, all these libraries, school libraries, public libraries have a policy that they're the appropriate channel to go through for challenging material. And a lot of people don't take the time to go through that process. So if it's not on record, there may be a lot more out there that hasn't actually been captured at all in this data.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if they haven't followed their process, which in the Penn study, it was like, I think 98% of the time it was the case that people had not followed the process. And if you don't follow the process, then you could see certainly books being taken off the shelf, made unavailable without anybody knowing, being none the wiser. Or, frankly, you have this sort of passive censorship where people are checking out books and never intending to return them as well, and that has the same effect.
Yeah, we actually just saw an alert from the Office of Intellectual Freedom about people checking out entire Pride book displays, so they won't be displayed this month, to kind of try to hide that message.
That's
Yes.
I don't know about the panel, but this is really scary to me. Okay, I don't want to get off on a tangent. Let's go.
We understand. It's a very passionate
Yeah.
topic when you start to think about how a challenge can snowball into a much larger issue and then have this chilling effect.
Yeah.
Adults going in and checking out a dozen books and then just not bringing them back.
And I guess
Stealing, really, at the base of it, frankly.
say that again, Easter.
And it's doing that. It's stealing the books. That's taxpayer money.
Oh
that
gosh.
they're taking those books.
Okay, y'all heard that? That is a crime, people. That is a crime. Okay.
Yeah.
In April of this year, Penn American found 1,586 book bans targeting 1,145 unique books had occurred in the past 9 months. Also in this year, the ALA published its annual report on book censorship, finding 729 attempts to remove school, university, and library materials. I can't believe universities are in this group in 2021. That resulted in 1,597 book challenges or actual removals. So, Easter, why are these numbers significant?
I think they're significant because, you have, ALA, reported the numbers from just 2021. That's 12 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Penn does this, analysis. It's looking at specifically July of 2021 to March of 2022. And you see from the numbers that, you've got Penn's study, which only looked at 9 months, is, very close to the number of challenges that ALA reported in all of 2021. So that's really kind of illustrates how much it's been ramping up even into this year.
Okay, other panelists, y'all want to chime in?
I think that the numbers, I think when you look at a chart of what the numbers of book challenges have been over the years and just see this sudden spike in 2021 that is so dramatic, it definitely makes you question how quickly the message is getting around to people to go in and challenge books, to show up at library board meetings or school board meetings or at libraries or whatever it is that people are showing up to complain about the books. What we're discovering is the majority of them have not even read the books. They have seen panels or sections taken out of context that are specifically used to get people angry and confused and concerned, but they aren't looking at the entire work, the entire book, which is really relevant in determining whether or not it is appropriate.
I was going to ask that
Right,
question
and-
later on too. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, ALA, like Lisa was saying, has been, tracking challenges for, 20 years or so, more than that probably, actually. But this is a very significant spike just within the last, year compared to all the other years that ALA has been tracking. And like Lisa said, a lot of it is, it's coming from groups, that were, previously organized, to protest masks, and they've built this nationwide network of individuals and groups, and, they're, just targeting them.
Wow. Alexander, you have anything you want to add?
No, that's pretty well covered.
Okay. All right, Easter, what's the difference between a challenge and a ban?
Well, a challenge, that an attempt to remove or restrict materials based on the objections of a person or group. Now, you have to understand this goes beyond a person simply expressing a point of view, but they are attempting to remove material from a library and thereby restrict the access of others. In contrast, banning, that is when the material is actually removed from the library.
Lisa, this is not on the list of questions that I sent you guys, but do we have any numbers on the number of books that actually have been banned over the last year?
We do not have specific numbers on book banning because part of what, as Easter has said, sometimes there's this quiet banning where books are taken, checked out, and not returned. Mm-hmm. And that's hard to track because you don't know where those books are in their cycle.
Okay.
Of having been checked out or returned. Sorry, did that make sense, Easter? Did I just flub that?
I thought it made sense.
You got it.
Yeah, I thought it made sense. And again, people who listen to the podcast, taking books out of the library and not returning them is theft. THEFT. All right.
Well, taking them out and intentionally not returning them is theft. If you take them out and you forget to bring them back because you have so much going on in your life, we understand that. But intentionally removing them with no plan on returning.
Thank you.
Is wrong.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Okay. Lisa, what's involved in the process of a book banning or book challenge before the actual material is removed from the library?
Thank you for asking that. I think it's important for people to understand that there is a process, right? Libraries, school, public, academic, have a reconsideration process. So a complaint about a book comes in and library staff will review the complaint and do research on the book. They'll determine, has it received any reviews? Does it have starred reviews, which is something that's important to us? Has it been on any award-winning book lists? Is it relevant? Does it have accurate information? Has it earned its place on the shelf? And the library staff will make a recommendation and have a conversation with the person filing the complaint. And if the person isn't satisfied with the results of the reconsideration, they can file an appeal. So there is a process in place for people who take issue with a book.
Okay.
And it's important to add that, as it is very important to be engaged with our communities, and we do welcome dialogue about materials.
Absolutely.
But as a profession, we try our best to resist all efforts of censorship, and banning materials is definitely censorship.
Okay, Alexandra, we want you to weigh in on this one. Typically, it's parents, teachers, and other stakeholders that express concerns over the works that the students are reading in schools. And this sounds like a direct opposite of learning and education. What other groups are challenging books, and what's your assessment?
Yeah, you covered most of the basic ones. You'll have political groups that do too, or religious groups, as well. But I'm going to preface this by saying I'm not a parent, so I don't have that aspect of it. I know Easter is. Not sure about Lisa. If they want to weigh in afterwards, sure. But having worked in early education, having worked in children's museums, situations like that, where you're learning about, child development and, how they see the world, when you come at it from an angle, all parents want to protect their children. I get that, you don't want them to go into that. But when you're kind of influenced by, a position of prejudice, a position of hate, and you carry that over into materials that provide another aspect that could give a wider world perspective, and you immediately come against that instead of, reading it for yourself, seeing what the actual content is, seeing what its message is, and just coming at it hot from the get-go, you're not really helping a child learn, a child grow. You're really adding your own prejudice and your own hate and your own mindset and kind of poisoning the well in a way. So when you're doing these book bans and things, you think, oh, I'm doing it for kids, I'm doing it for my child, take a step back. I want these people who are hot about it to take a step back and think about it. Are you really helping, or are you harming that development at a very crucial point, whether they're, it's just, a book of, somebody holding hands, when they're younger, or it's, the genderqueer. If you read that when you're 14, 15, you're having issues deciding about who you are or people you may know. You're having that other perspective of somebody who's been through that can mean a world of help to somebody who needs it. And to kind of close that off based on one or two panels is throwing out, it's the old expression, throwing out the baby with the bathwater. You're shutting down a whole pipeline when, that will cause more harm than one or two images in a book.
The Harry, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I'll add from a parent perspective. Certainly I think as a parent and as a librarian, parents have the right to make choices on how to protect and raise their own children. But those rights do not extend to making decisions for other people's children. And so one person's child may not be ready for a certain topic, but another person's child may be. And you making that decision to prevent access for my kid, well, I have a problem with that.
Yeah.
And, on top of that, you have to consider, again, you have a choice to read books or to not read books. And being a parent gives you the opportunity to talk to your children about your values and what you believe. And you need to talk to your kid. You need to talk to your teacher. If they're being assigned a book that you personally don't agree with, then you know what? They can read a different book. And I will say that happened to me when I was growing up. My parent did not like the book that I was being assigned to read in class. And I ended up reading another book. It wasn't that, that book was then being pushed to be banned for. I didn't read that book.
I was going to give a parent's perspective too when people were trying to when people challenged the Harry Potter series. I thought it was kind of ridiculous, and I read the books along with my son so that I would understand, what he was reading, and I could offer a different perspective than what he was hearing in the media or in church about the series. And so we encourage parents to actually read these books before you make a decision. Okay, our next question is directed to the panel. What's different about the spate of challenges and bans in 2021 and 2022 compared to these types of challenges in the past?
I'll jump in here. This is Lisa. I would say that challenges in the past they typically come from, I think, what we've seen, and I don't mean to just rip on Harry Potter because there have been so many others. I'll use Judy Bloom as an example. Judy Bloom wrote books about life experiences back in the 70s and 80s that were very popular with lots of readers. But few people felt that she was being too honest about some life experience of people. So, for example, the book Forever was challenged a lot because it dealt with sex. And that one is coming back again because, as we've seen on these lists, because at the time the book was written, there wasn't an AIDS crisis, and so there isn't a discussion in the book of STDs. And so that is coming back up again as people opposing that it doesn't have a concern about using condoms and protection against STDs, not just against pregnancy. Sorry, I realize I'm going off the rails here. But what we're seeing when we're seeing those types of challenges, it's specifically maybe one parent who read it and then opposed it, as opposed to what we're seeing now, which is, here is a list, show up at your school board meetings, show up at libraries and complain about these books because we feel that these are the opposite of what we want to do to protect our children. So they use this phrase a lot, protecting children, keeping kids kids. when you're talking actually about protecting just a certain type of kid who is not, I'm sorry, I am stumbling over my words here.
That's okay. That's okay.
Because I get so passionate about it. Sorry.
That's what we were looking for.
When you talk about protecting children when it comes to books, you are talking about protecting a certain type of child. You are not opening your mind to the idea that there are children out there with a million different life experiences that maybe need to read and connect with a story that is similar to theirs. Or they may have a friend who is going through something that is really hard, and having a book to help your kid be able to understand what their friend is experiencing is vital. And what we're seeing is, well, I don't like that life experience, so I don't want anybody else to have access to it.
Okay.
I mean, I think that books are definitely a non-threatening way to experience how others see life and to develop empathy. That kind of just goes off with what Lisa said. But it is also, I think, important for the social emotional development of students to see, characters in books, go through, these different conflicts, and then they're able to it might help them to be able to discuss things in their own lives.
Okay.
And I'll also add, if I can, that in these lawsuits in Virginia Beach, one of the things we're seeing about the rhetoric of that is it isn't just about the books or the publishers. The attacks have taken on a life of their own, in which the General Assembly member did a FOIA request for the names of the head librarians at various schools. And that's very concerning to us.
Wow.
To question the identity of the librarians.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's laws being passed out there in places where, people want to put librarians in jail for providing certain materials, or, fining them and just kind of threatening their general life and daily livelihood in very scary ways out there.
Yeah, I saw something in the news yesterday about the Virginia Beach School Board is going to be considering something in their policy that would keep some of the proceedings from being recorded for the public to hear, because people are being targeted. School board members and teachers are being targeted. Educators are being targeted.
Specifically. So I was at that meeting, and it was really heartbreaking to listen to these educators talk about how anybody can come up and say anything they want during their 3-minute comment period and defame people without those educators having a chance to speak up for themselves or defend themselves. Again. And this is the tactic that we've seen of this specific group of people.
Okay, I think you guys have already answered my next question. I was going to ask about education and specifically people being trained to educate children and the techniques and tools. I think Alexander addressed that. So, Easter, we're going to go to the next question.
Can I jump in on that real quick?
All right. That's okay.
When I said I was at the school board meeting, I did speak there, and I want to share what I said there as an explanation of what drives people who've chosen books as their talking points. So the words I used then were, over the years, all of the book challenges I have seen boil down to one personality characteristic on the part of the petitioner. Complainants have often lost control of something in their personal or professional lives and act out by thinking they can control what people read. Their accusations against books or media often say more about who those people are than they do about the books they are opposed to. The same is happening here. After 2 years of a loss of control of so many things due to the pandemic, we have a small group making a lot of noise about books, and not just about books, but about librarians and educators. The use of the words like grooming and indoctrination in reference to books are purposefully antagonizing and insult and diminish people who have actually been groomed and indoctrinated.
I don't know. Are y'all in this region? Y'all live in this region? Everybody?
Yes, I live in Virginia Beach.
Okay, there's an ad for a political rival that uses that term, education, not indoctrination. As soon as she says it, the hackles on the back of your neck go up, because we know exactly where that's going. Okay, Easter, in most recent book banning cases, what types of books are being targeted?
The great question. So you will hear people over and over again saying, it's porn and obscenity, but really what you're seeing is it's authors and topics related to Black, Indigenous, or persons of color. And you also see Black American history books being targeted, which there's a lot of folks out there who are calling those CRT books, critical race theory,
Yeah.
which is, it's not accurate.
And it's not taught in public school, K through 12, as far as I know.
No, it's not.
No, it hasn't been.
I think we got it in college.
Yeah, it's an academic theory.
Oh my gosh.
You definitely don't, in K through 12 schools, they aren't talking, they're not bringing out the college textbooks
Mhm.
and going through theory. They wouldn't last, 5 minutes with that.
Oh gosh. Okay, this question is for the panel. So books dealing with race, gender, and sexuality seem to be at the top of the list of these books being targeted by parents and other stakeholders. From your research, what is the reasoning behind these books being targeted to be removed from school libraries? And y'all may have already answered this question, but go ahead and reiterate why you think this is these books are being targeted.
I think there's it's part of a larger symptom we're seeing in the country right now. We're seeing this resistance. It's always been there, but it's being amplified, a resistance to change, right? A resistance to what's different. We just had this weird period where, we weren't working, we were stuck at home, and, we weren't driving, we didn't have the daily rigmarole of life. And, you're seeing this in, people are being told to go back to offices, right? But nobody wants to go back to offices. So there's this pulling forth. And we're not taking this opportunity we could have to make a huge social change. And, we're trying to fight the tide of going back. And tying into that, over the past couple of years, we've seen this kind of resistance to things going on, and it's kind of coming to a head. And so, things that are different are what's being challenged out there. So it is issues of, hey, with critical race theory, here's things of history you didn't know,
Mhm.
right? Or here's another way to look at it. And, it's kind of there's this inherent trust in our institutions already,
Mhm.
and it's kind of flipping that on its head in a way that people don't like. It's a change that's needed, but it's not the change some people are looking for.
Okay, I think
You're
you got
making
it.
a lot of sense.
I think
No,
you
you're
got- I
making a
think
lot
you-
of sense, though. It's
Yeah.
absolutely, and it goes back to one of the things that I had just mentioned about control, right? We
Yeah.
saw this huge wave of people loving teachers back in March of 2020, right? March and April.
Right.
People were stunned by educators and how much work they were doing to try to keep some sense of normalcy. And then within the short period of time, suddenly we are on the attack about schools and education and what's in the curriculum. And it is really, I can't imagine what it is like to be an educator right now. It's hard enough
No.
in every other aspect of life, but to be an educator and watch your profession be torn apart in this way is really heartbreaking, because the people who go into educating are all about the students.
Yep.
The students are their priority. And when you have discussions like this and political plays for sound bites and things to be promoted, whether it's misinformation or disinformation, you are wiping away the needs of the kids when you are focusing it on yourself.
Okay, guys,
I think there were seeds of distrust that were sown probably about between 5 to 10 years ago, right? And then there was this sea change of what's different. What happens when we don't go to work? What happens when this? Oh, things didn't fall apart as much, or we value these institutions, right? But then trying to get back, for some reason we're trying to get back there instead of seizing the moment and pushing forward. And, and this resistance has kind of come to a head in a way that's strange and not really letting people be letting people be themselves, I guess, and letting the truth come out.
All right. Listen, guys, we've been going for quite a while here, so we're going to take a short pause for the cause. Y'all get some water, stay on the line with us. We'll be right back.
I think it's just vapor. Vaping is safer than smoking, isn't it?
One vape pod has as much nicotine as one pack of cigarettes. Get your head out of the cloud. Talk to your kid about vaping. Visit talkaboutvaping.org. Brought to you by the American Lung Association and the Ad Council.
Okay, we're back. This is Let's Talk Portsmouth, and we're in our second segment. We're talking about book bans and book challenges with Lisa Varga from the Virginia Library Association, Easter DiGangi, and Alexander Grosby from the Portsmouth Public Library. So, guys, we're about to wrap up this segment. NBC News reported last year that there were about 165 local and national groups that aim to disrupt lessons on race and gender. These groups distribute lists of books shared online by conservative advocacy organizations, and the lists are then shared with parents who audit local schools and libraries to see if the targeted book titles are present. Do you think these people are actually reading the books targeted, or are the conservative advocacy groups spreading theories about what they think is being represented in the books? To the panel.
I'd like to take this one because actually this morning one of our library directors received a phone call opposing the inclusion of genderqueer in the public library's collection. And when the director spoke with the individual, the caller stated they had not yet read the book, but had received literature about it.
Okay.
So we know that groups are purposely giving partial bits of information to people and sending them into places to oppose these items. And it's that person's prerogative to have not read the book, but to go ahead and complain anyway.
It's easier to do that than read the book. It's easier
Correct.
to distribute a list than to read the book. Okay.
Right. And I will say that when these lists are circulated and the names of the books are used in media or posted somewhere, do you know who runs to read them? The kids who can have access to them. That's not all kids, right? But the people who want to get access to those books will find a way to get to them. And especially when you say the name of a book that people don't want you to read, I think people do run to it.
Okay. Anybody else?
I was just going to say, I'm blanking on his name at the moment, but he used to do the Reading Rainbow.
LeVar Burton.
LeVar Burton.
Huh?
LeVar Burton.
LeVar Burton.
You got it. That's it. I just couldn't think of his name off the top of my head. Anyway, but he definitely, I know he's been in the news lately and going out there and supporting intellectual freedom. But he definitely said, and I agree, right along with what Lisa said, which is that go read the books that are being banned. But that's where the good stuff is.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is for the panel again. What are some of the short and long-term effects of book banning and challenging and having them actually removed from schools or public libraries? And I know all of y'all are passionate about this. We'll start with Alexander. What's the long-term?
Yeah, I mean, short term, you're going to get interest in the book, so people are going to read it more, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to seek it out in other avenues and find out, kids aren't dumb. Kids are going to be like, oh, this is causing a ruckus. I want to know about it. It's like anything else. When you raise the age on something, you're creating a stigma about it, and you're adding to the intrigue to it, which wants them to seek it out more because they can't have it, right? So you're going to have that. But then long term, right? Someone comes along and they want to know that subject of that book, and their public library, has banned it, and it's been forgotten about. It's not going to come back, then you're missing a voice, that could have added to somebody's development, somebody's mental health, somewhere down the line, and all because of a short-sighted item, 2 to 3 pages, 2 to 3 panels, whatever small amount of the total work, that you had been bothered by, for something that you're not even the audience of potentially.
Mm-hmm. Ladies?
I think that some of what we see going on, if not addressed, could affect, in the long run, the the library being more politicized, information not being available, it not being, the library is for everyone. It's only for the specific people who take it over and silence everyone. That's not a library for everyone, and that's not what we want. That's not, the kind of democracy that our forefathers were, setting up.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just add to that, when you ban a book, you are silencing voices and stories. And I personally think challenging books is a healthy part of a democracy. I think people should be able to ask questions and have an honest discussion with a librarian or an educator about the content of titles. It's one of the reasons libraries have this reconsideration process, and it helps with dialogue. And the big question becomes, who decides what is a good or bad book? And the whole concept of a library is that it includes information for everyone, all points of view written from all kinds of perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
Book selection doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's actually a science studied by librarians and educators. This collection is a living thing. It needs to be cared for, reviewed, and reevaluated constantly. And library staff do that. So if you have one person or a group that doesn't have a diversity of voices and perspectives, do you want them selecting books for a community? And the answer is no. You want variety. You want representation.
And that's quite logical. I didn't know that was a process. That was good information. Okay, let me ask you this, guys. Can a banned or challenged book be removed from the internet, say Amazon, digital libraries, etc.? If the process goes through, can it actually be removed from the internet?
I don't know about totally removed from the internet. It's a large place.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've seen that on that scale. But removing something from any platform is always a possibility. As far as digital libraries, there are school districts, including there's one in Austin, Texas, and one in Florida, that have banned digital libraries. A school district in Austin, Texas, decided to vote to ban the Overdrive system, which runs a program called Libby that we use here. Just all their titles because they felt like they couldn't have any. The parents felt like they couldn't have any control over that word control, over what their kids were reading on that platform, and so they just decided to just get rid of the whole thing.
To remove all of the books.
Yep. Yeah. They terminated their contract with them and removed the entire system.
Okay. Y'all,
certainly things can be. Amazon. They have taken books off of people's Kindles before. And just refunded them the money. So that's happened before.
But I thought it was for like a reissue or something for. I never known to remove something.
I can't remember the title, but it was a big hullabaloo when that first happened. I don't know, maybe Lisa or Alex remember what the title was, but there was a lot of pushback at that time, and certainly that's the thing in the digital sphere. When you don't own the physical item, you're just leasing it for a period of time, and in that sense, there is less control that the library has in general over that content, and you have not just the library, but the publisher or distributor who might remove that access. And of course, like Alex was talking about, that was in the case of those particular places, it was the the people that had the subscriptions to those materials as well.
Oh, goodness gracious.
But at the end of the day, even with digital and physical materials, it still comes back down to, we respect a parent's right to choose what their kid has access to. We are not going to be the arbiters of what people have access to. Parents need to do their jobs and look at what their kids are reading, talk to them. Making a decision for everybody that no one can access it is not the right thing. The right thing is to talk about it. And that's part of that civic engagement piece, which that's democracy.
Okay. Lisa, did you have anything to add before I ask the last question here?
No, please go ahead.
All righty. So this is for everybody again. Is there anything that parents, teachers, or other stakeholders can do to prevent book challenges or bans?
That's a really good question. Did you want to add on to that, Lisa, when I'm done?
Yes, please go ahead, Easter.
Okay. Yep. So I think there's a number of things you can do. You can lead a local group, that is about the freedom to read. There's a lot of local groups out there, and that's a good thing. You can be an ally to the library. Let your library workers know they have support in their community, and say, hey, here's my contact information. Let me know how I can help. You can give a presentation on First Amendment rights to local groups like the Rotary, League of Women Voters, Chamber of Commerce. You've got the Students Club here in Portsmouth, and yes, Rotary here as well.
Mm-hmm.
But you can attend a meeting, go to city council, go to the library board, make sure you speak up and let your, representatives know how you feel about this, that, you support the First Amendment and you want parents to, have the right to decide what's best for their kids, not by preventing others to have access to it, but by providing that access to that so that they can make that choice. You can write letters, to the media and to your representatives, telling them about how much you value your library, and you can post on social media. I mean, social media can be a tool for good,
Mm-hmm.
and certainly sharing, that you support the First Amendment and the right to read. That's a great place to do that.
Okay.
Now I'll yield to Lisa. I'm sure she has great things to add.
Oh, that's very generous of you. The main thing I will add is just to say vote, especially when there are local elections. What we have seen is an increase in people with this rhetoric against books being elected onto school boards. So please pay attention to those elections, not just your school board elections, but your congressional elections. Right now we are in the middle of an open primary, so you can vote, even if you are not in the Virginia 02 right now. It is a Republican election to get the nomination for the fall for Congress, but even if you are a registered Democrat, you can vote in the Republican election. Just an FYI, just putting some information out there. The thing that I would also recommend is that everybody join the Unite Against Book Bans. That's UABB, Unite Against Book Bans campaign. The American Library Association recently conducted a bipartisan poll that found 71% of voters oppose efforts to remove books from public libraries, including majorities of voters across party lines. So we do know that the large majority of Americans are opposed to book bans, and Unite Against Book Bans helps to keep those people who are interested in First Amendment rights together and updated on things that are happening across the U.S. You'll get weekly emails and or ask you to do a writing campaign or something along those lines, because we just want to enable readers everywhere to stand together in the fight against censorship. So Unite Against Book Bans is not just for librarians and library folks. It is for a reader in any part of our country to join up. And it's free. Just get email.
Okay. All right, guys, we're going to take another quick break, and then we're going to wrap up this issue of Let's Talk Portsmouth. Stand by.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived in Philadelphia. Local time is 3:05 p.m. and the temperature is 67 degrees. At this time, you are now free to use your cellular devices.
You know that feeling when you get to turn your phone on after the plane lands? You can have that feeling every time you drive. Make sure your cell phone is stowed away whenever you are behind the wheel.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, a message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
All right. Thanks, guys, for joining us today on Let's Talk Portsmouth. We might have to have you come back for a second segment on this. This is a very interesting discussion. Do you have any last thoughts you'd like to leave with our listening audience? I'll start with you, Lisa.
I'm so thankful you asked us to be part of this today, because it's really gratifying when you're passionate about something to see it being given this level of attention. So just thank you very much, Sharon.
Thank you. Easter?
I just wanted to say that, as a profession, we stand with our patrons and their, right to access information. And that's in the ALA Library Bill of Rights.
Okay. Alexander, you got anything you want to leave with our audience?
Yeah, of course. Come visit the Portsmouth Public Library. It's a great place to be. And we have our summer reading program going on right now for all ages. So everybody should come out and join. Adults, if you sign up, you only have to read 3 books. You get a free book when you do that. And then also you'll be entered to win a Roku Express. And we have one for every location. So great odds based on where you sign up.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, y'all, that's a wrap for this issue of Let's Talk Portsmouth. We sincerely hope that you got something out of this conversation. Here's your thought for today. The things I want to know are in books. My best friend is the man who'll get me a book I ain't read. Abraham Lincoln, 16th President of the United States. Until next time, we're out of here.
Thanks for listening to Let's Talk Portsmouth, the podcast that's about the city of Portsmouth and our connections around the globe. Listen and download our next episode for more news you can use and information that may just change your perspective. Find our podcast where you find quality podcasts, the Podbean app, Spotify, and Amazon Music Audible. Until next time, take care.